I'm joined today by Paul Wise, who's Head of Professional Services at Evelyn Partners, and they've done an annual survey of the law firms in Ireland. And we'll just wait for a few more people to join, and we'll start at 1 o'clock sharp. And I'm joined by Mark Lowry also, who's Business Development at Evelyn Partners. So you're all very welcome today. Thanks, guys, for joining us, and thanks for sharing your information with us today, which I know is current and gives us a good insight into the legal industry or at the moment.
And thanks for the opportunity to talk today, Justin, about what's happened in the most recent survey and, what's going on in the marketplace. It's a fairly dynamic marketplace at the moment with the new entrants, as we say, over the last 5 years in particular, and the impact that they're starting to have. And then you also have the fact that London is paying fairly eye-watering salaries to qualified solicitors now. And that's having an impact on firms also.
Which is probably making the market more difficult for everybody. I mean, my area of focus is really small practitioners, and they're definitely feeling that the bigger firms in Dublin are affecting their ability to recruit and attract trainees or qualified solicitors or experienced solicitors. So
it's a much more competitive battlefield now to recruit and retain talent. And we'll talk a little bit about that during the survey review.
Yeah, so it's just gone 1 o'clock. You're all very welcome to this Law Society information session from Practice Support. I'm joined today by Paul Wise, Head of Professional Services at Evelyn Partners, and Mark Lowry, who's Head of Business Development at Evelyn Partners. And we're here to discuss their annual survey of law firms. So Paul, you're very welcome. And
Thanks,
Mark, you're very welcome also. So over to you guys. We'll take questions on the chat, and maybe just we'll probably keep them at the end unless there's something really pertinent. So you're very welcome today.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. And I'll do the advert first in terms of just who Evelyn are. We're one of Ireland and the UK's leading integrated wealth management and professional services group, which makes us quite unique because we have a professional services in the traditional accountancy sense, and we have wealth management, which is a huge part of our business as well. And as a group, we've about 56 billion sterling, stroke 60 billion sterling euros under management. And we work a lot in the professional services sector and carry out this annual law survey, and have been doing so in the UK for quite a while and in Ireland now for 11 years. So we're quite a big firm because we've 1,700 people in the professional services area and 3,000 staff generally. So quite a big firm. Okay, let's get down to the brass tacks of the survey this year. So we had 108 firms partake, and just, to say to people, if they would like their firms to partake in the survey, if they could email Mark, and I'll give you very quickly his email details, which is mark.lowry@evelyn.com. We'd be delighted, because we do this through an independent research house, and Red Sea carry it out. And as you can see, about 53% of firms are regional and 47% are Dublin. We got 14 of the top 20 firms. We've 41 mid-tier firms. What is a mid-tier firm? It's firms with more than 3 partners, and then small firms as firms with less than 3 partners. Okay, Mark, if we can move on.
So just Paul, quick one. When's the next survey going out, and when would people need to sign up with Mark?
So they need to sign up with Mark probably by July, August. The survey goes into field in September, from the first week in September, and it takes 4 weeks, and then effectively we produce the results around the beginning of November is when we have the report ready. Why do I have John McEnroe on a slide when I'm presenting to the legal sector? I think, when we consider what's happened in the last 5 years, I mean, it's been a significant turbulent period in our lives. We've had Brexit, we've had the introduction of the LSRA, we've had COVID, we've had a war in Ukraine, and now we have rising inflation and interest rates. And I suppose, when we looked at this last year, we were saying, hopefully we'll be getting to the new normal. Is that it? But the reality is, we've been thrown an awful lot, so you cannot be serious. You can't keep throwing these big curveballs at us, is the reason we've used the headline. So if we move on to the survey itself, there are 5 key themes. So we take a look at the sector outlook and confidence. We take a look at the landscape of competition and financial results. We take a look at talent, recruitment, retention. We take a look at strategy, and we take a look at technology and cyber. I suppose you know, it's been a very challenging period, and there are probably some key themes that will come out as we go through the results this year. Mark, if you want to go on to the next slide. So when we get to outlook, I suppose last year, a lot of firms were anticipating that we would be looking at a very rosy picture for 2022. Because we're analyzing the last 12 months is really 2022, and the next 12 months was looking at forward to 2023. So most firms were anticipating an improvement in outlook for the sector for 22. However, only 27% of firms actually reported an improvement over the last 12 months. So it's quite a significant drop. Now, obviously the war in Ukraine, rising energy prices, inflation, etc., all started to happen during 2022. The second thing that happened was in the back end of last year, from probably summer on, we saw a slowdown in activity. People started to halt on projects. Construction sector started to get a bit quiet. People started deferring CapEx projects. People started to defer M&A projects. So there was a very significant shift from being very active and busy to one where people didn't know what was going to happen, and there was a let's wait and see type of attitude. And for that reason, when you look at the next 12 months, you know, people are hoping for more stability, but there's concern about growth. And I think, you know, the confidence for the outlook for 23, when we looked at this, the back end of 22 had changed, with only 13% of firms expecting an improvement. So that's quite a dramatic change from the year before. And I think it's important to say, like, almost 1 in 2 regional firms saw things deteriorating for 2023. So, you know, slightly different to the Dublin marketplace. If we go to the next slide then, and we see, you know, what is going on. The top 20 are in a different marketplace in our view, you know, compared to many law firms in the country. But they too also saw this significant decline in, you know, confidence over the coming 12 months, and only 36% of them saw that we would see an improvement. And 1 in 2 of the top 20 expected deterioration in outlook for the next 12 months. So we move on. What are the key issues affecting the sector? Well, I suppose, you know, they're fairly similar no matter what size of firm you have when you get to the bigger ones. The first is the economy and inflation and rising interest rates, because that has an impact on the pace of growth in the sector. The second is obviously around recruitment and retention. It is a much bigger issue for the top 20 firms, but it's an issue really for all firms. Staff are being poached and pinched, and lateral hires are continuing apace. The London market certainly increased dramatically the salaries for qualified solicitors, and that became an attraction as well. The third area is obviously how to maintain profitability, especially when you're looking at increasing wage rates and salary rates. You're looking at increased PI costs. You're looking at increase in energy costs. So maintaining profitability is certainly an issue for most firms. One that seemed to be impacting and was commented on this year by smaller firms was the burden of regulatory and compliance costs. And that seems to be an increasing issue for them. So I think it's something that we just have to keep an eye on. If we go to the next slide then, Mark. So when we look at firm performance, I suppose that the good news is we saw revenue growth in the majority of firms, but we saw less profit growth. And that's because of the issues I highlighted around increasing salaries at fairly meaty rates and operating costs. And while, you know, 35% of the top 20 firms reported revenue increases in excess of 10%, only 21% of them reported a profit increase in excess of 10%. So you're looking at half of the firms getting the increase in turnover to their bottom line. And that is the case with smaller firms as well. 28% of other firms reported an increase of 10% in their revenue line, but less got it to the bottom line. The other issue we're seeing is that at the back end of last year, the levels of lockup were increasing. Now, part of that is with the backlog of cases in court in litigation cases, but also as things got a bit tight, people's payment patterns became slower. And we just saw a noticeable increase in work in progress and debtors in some of the firms and what they were reporting back to us. And then, you know, whereas firms are normally much more positive about their own firm compared to the sector, The decline in confidence was obvious this year, with 29% only saying that they viewed the next 12 months with confidence and 50% expecting it to be stable. So there was a notable decline across the marketplace. Next slide. This just gives a bit more granular look at the increases in revenues over the last 4 years across all firms and across the top 20 firms, and also the same for profits. So as I said, like, you know, where top 20 firms, most of them saw an increase in their revenues over the last 12 months. Only half of them saw an increase in their profitability. And for the remainder, 55% saw revenue increases, but 41% saw profit growth. So just, you know, you can see where you fit in, where your firm fits in against a benchmark there. And in our report, we actually break it down between, you know, what rate of growth we're seeing, whether it's 5%, 10%, 10% plus, etc. Okay, Mark, go to the next one. So what are firms doing to try and improve their performance? You know, firms have been able to increase their fees. I think that's important. The market has been tolerating fee increases in the last couple of years, which is a positive dimension. And those firms that are not increasing their fees are effectively yielding ground to their competitors. So that's positive. The second thing is a lot of firms have looked at their business processes to see how they become more efficient. There's been some investment in technology, some investment in third-party advisory to try and see how you can improve your processes. There's been an increased effort in marketing and sales. Well, obviously that happened because we did none during COVID or very little during COVID. And this was one of the first years we've been able to return to some level of normality. And then for bigger firms, you know, they're continuously looking at new markets and new services and adding to what they have. So they're the type of things that they have done. Next slide, please. So when we look at the sector, I suppose the biggest issue definitely this year was around the war for talent, as we call it. I'm going to cover off 3 areas, if I may: remote working, recruitment and retention, and pay and reward. I suppose, you know, when we deal with remote working, COVID forced us to work from home, and the return to the office was seen as a chance to create a much more effective operating model with flexibility that worked for both employers and employees. COVID also changed attitudes to in-office working and 9-to-5 office working as well. Many people reevaluated effectively their work-life balance and career aspirations during the pandemic. Reconciling employee and employer wishes is now a significant and new management challenge, requiring effective leadership and project management skill sets. Over the past year, we continue to experience ongoing challenges from COVID, with lockdowns lasting until Q1 22 for most firms, and staff returning to some level of in-office working during 2022. COVID absences continued due to large numbers still contracting new strains of the virus, albeit less impactful, and most people have been able to work from home during those periods. But there are hybrid working patterns starting to emerge. And I suppose we asked a number of questions in the survey this year about that. Most top 20 firms, about 80% of them, and mid-tier urban-based firms have implemented a hybrid model of 3 days in the office and 2 days working remotely for partners and associates. Most firms require trainees to be in the office 4 to 5 days per week. Regional offices, about 80%, and smaller Dublin-based firms, about 60%, are operating an in-office-based model with less flexibility around, you know, hybrid working. And most, you know, if I take where we are now in 2023 and where we were in 2022, I'd say by Q4 2022, most large firms were reporting attendance levels of between 40% to 60% in their offices on a daily basis. That has now increased to 60 to 80%, especially during midweek, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Fridays, I think there is desert islands almost in a lot of office blocks around Fridays, and Mondays a little bit, but less so. So remote working has benefits in terms of widening the geographical area firms can recruit talent from. The well-documented lack of available accommodation, increasing rental costs and property prices in cities is a key issue for staff and firms, that have necessitated accommodating hybrid and remote working. And it's much more attractive to staff than having to do long commutes to city-based offices. But many people we have found since COVID are less prepared to work longer hours. You know, they have got used to a lifestyle. And this is a real issue for many law firms now, because there was a tendency to do very long hours in law firms. And while that has not necessarily changed at partner level or senior management, it's certainly an issue for younger staff in these offices. And I think we just have to realize that mental well-being is becoming a bigger issue among younger people. And the second thing is that, we don't have the consistency and stickability or retainability of staff anymore. Younger people want to move around and see their career as stepping stones and are not afraid to move from firm to firm, which would be a change from when I was growing up as a trainee in an accountancy firm. So I think, having a highly engaged workforce, which increases productivity, decreases absenteeism, and increases profitability, is the key challenge for the management teams in law firms now. And keeping people positive and engaged is the key to success. Moving on to recruitment and retention. I suppose this is the area where we have seen, the battle lines drawn. Many firms have now seen staff turnover levels in excess of 10%, which was a traditional high watermark in the profession. 1 in 3 of the top 20 firms and 1 in 4 of firms in Dublin are reporting staff turnover levels well in excess of this 10%. Recruitment costs are increasing significantly, and the recruitment companies have now targeted effectively the legal sector. They see it as a rich vein of potential work because people are prepared to move around it. And there are certainly much more lateral hiring going on in the marketplace. With the entrance of the UK and international law firms, this has also increased the moving of staff around the place. We now have 7 of the top 20 firms being UK and international firms. Over 50 partners have been recruited by these firms, mainly from top 20 and mid-tier firms. And almost all of the top 20 are reporting significant increase in competition from these firms and staff losses to them. There's been over 100 lateral hires reported to us by 13 of the top 20 firms. If you extrapolate that out, that's 150 among the top 20 alone before you get to the mid-tier, etc. That's a lot of movement of senior personnel around the profession. The impact is now filtering down to mid-tier and smaller firms as qualified solicitors are being attracted by higher salaries in these firms in the city. The eye-watering salaries in London in excess of 100,000 sterling for newly qualified and 1 and 2 year is also adding to the battlefield. And also, as I said, younger people are much more likely to change and move jobs more frequently and feel less bonded with an employer and have no issue moving on. So let's come to the third aspect, the pay and reward. Last year, we saw significant pay increases across the profession as an effort to combat these lateral hiring and recruitment activities going on. If you're in the regions, you seem to be less impacted, is what I would say, with 65% of regional firms highlighting to us that they didn't have to change their payroll figures last year, which many Dublin firms would envy, and Cork and Limerick firms also. So when you look though at the scale of increase, and I'm talking about above 6%, you're looking at 2 in 3 firms in Dublin having to pay more than 6%. And almost 40% paying more than 10% in the last year. And that increases when you go to the top 20, with 57% increasing their pay rates by more than 10% last year. Where are we this year? I suppose the meaty increases of last year have scaled back a little bit, but you're certainly still in the realms of 5 to 10%, with a lot of firms in the band of 6 to 8%. From talking to managing partners in the Dublin marketplace. So still we're in the battlefields of high pay, I'm afraid, and having to increase fee rates. Okay. when we look at strategy and what's going on in the marketplace, I suppose, you know, we've picked out 5 themes here. M&A is becoming more commonplace. It's not necessarily widespread, but certainly, you know, we've now seen Phil Fisher with McDougall Purcell, and we've had Adelshaw Goddard with Eugene F. Collins, 2 notable M&A transactions in the last few years. We also saw Oger's merger with Lehman Solicitors. So there's a lot going on in mid and larger firms. Also, a lot of firms now are beginning to realize that, you know, they really do need to get about their succession planning. Senior partners in organizations are looking at what they enjoyed during COVID, what the work-life balance should be like and could be like, and doing things on the bucket list while you enjoy good health, all coming to fruition in their mindsets and saying, right, we have to sort this out. And dealing with the problem of younger solicitors in practices not necessarily wanting to be equity partners and having to put in the hours that senior partners in a lot of smaller firms have had to do over the years. So there's a compromising having to be done to figure out how to deal with succession planning in firms. And, you know, when you look at a lot of law firms, there is a silver tsunami because there's a lot of older partners in smaller firms looking for exit mechanisms to get out. The good news is that, you know, both large and smaller firms are looking at bolt-ons in a much more open way. The introduction of LLPs has enabled people to deal with the fears of the past and potential open-ended liabilities. So that certainly has helped. But I think, you know, the marketplace is certainly a much more flexible, turbulent marketplace in terms of, you know, where firms are going to go, what they're going to do, how they're going to deal with succession, and what type of M&A activity we will see. The lateral hiring I outlined has continued apace, and it was at, you know, fever pitch last year. It's still continuing, probably not at the same level as 2022, but it's still fairly going apace is what I'm going to say. There's over 400 firms now that are LLPs, and I suppose when we had the chairman of the LSRA speaking at an event, you know, he was highlighting that the type of issues that they're coming across is really dealing with the complaints and people engaging and firms engaging in that process early, and not sticking their head in the sand. And I think that's the mainstay of what he was saying, in addition to, obviously, they're looking at the training of solicitors. And I know the Law Society brought in their new training regime last September, which is a much more business focused in addition to legal practices, which is good to see. And lastly, obviously, the internationalization of Dublin. I mean, we have seen a significant amount of new firms in the Dublin marketplace. As a colleague of mine said, it's almost London on the Liffey now. We have over half of the top 30 UK law firms with an office open. We have 7 of our top 20 firms now international or UK firms. And it varies between a greenfield small office to a much more significant play to be in the top 10 in the Irish marketplace. And that has obviously impacts on competition in the marketplace, because some of these firms would have been referring chunky work into top 20 firms and are now retaining it themselves. And then partners that are moving from firms into these firms are trying to attract some of their client base with them. So quite a difficult marketplace for everybody to deal with. Okay, if we deal with technology next. So moving on to technology, I suppose one of the matters that people need to remember is, with these international firms coming into the marketplace, they have a significant investment in technology, and therefore their service offering and client portals are much more user-friendly and efficient than some firms have. And I think, you know, it's driving other firms to have to invest in technologies that they may have had out in 3 and 5 years' time, but are having to do sooner. So the type of things that we're seeing people investing in are obviously cybersecurity. We'll talk about that separately. enhancing the client experience is probably the number one aspect. What does the client see from the firm technology? How does the website look like? How does interacting with them look like? How the document transfer, signing of documents, all of these things are important when clients are looking at it. So firms are enhancing their digital brand. They're trying to improve their document management systems and their process automation, and trying to do some marketing with social media, etc. If we move on then just to cyber, the legal profession is a significant target for cyber criminals, because they have client monies, and sometimes I'm a bit bemused by the fact that people tell us, no, I've had no cyber attacks in a year. I mean, we have them daily. We have a number of them daily, because there are people sending emails with links, trying to encourage our staff to open the links, which gets them into the systems. And, I find it hard to believe that many law firms are not finding the same types of issues, and the levels being reported are quite low. But I think in reality, people are only reporting where they are aware of a significant attack, as distinct from the day-to-day phishing emails, etc. But that in reality is a cyber attack. And keeping up with cybersecurity is a critical part of any investment. So what next? I wish I had the one that told me what was going to happen next after all those things in the last 5 years. And these are all the issues that we've all had to face into. I think the piece of comfort is that the Irish economy is in a strong place. We do have problems. We have a massive housing problem that is causing issues for our staff, and in terms of dealing with workplace and hybrid and remote working. We have interest rates that will continue to increase, it seems, for a little bit longer. And inflation seems to be here for a longer period than we had been told at the start of the year. So we have to factor all of that in and the levels of activity of our client base. But I suppose the key thing for me is making sure that firms have enough information on their own teams and individual teams, as distinct from just having a set of management accounts about the firm itself. You need to be able to understand the micro impact on your firm as well as the macro impact. And developing dashboards that give you clear messages is very important. And we're doing a lot of work in the area at the moment in trying to help people dissect down to give you a real understanding to enable decisions to be made that are influenced by what's going on in the marketplace, and performance management. So, I'm still hopeful. I still think the sector is in good shape. I think it's a very competitive sector. I think retaining and recruitment of staff will continue to be a difficult issue. But the economy itself generally seems to be in good shape, and our client bases that we see of law firms seem to be in good shape. And I think and hope that the second half of this year we'll see an increasing level of activity. I think the hiatus of uncertainty and lack of confidence, people are beginning to say, look, we need to get on and move on and do things. So that's my positive end to the discussion today, Justin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. Very insightful, loads of different questions I think possible out of all of that. It seems to be a very, how would you say, marketplace that's in flux of sorts, both from this remote working point of view, prices going up, hiring, and then this move from the English firms into Ireland. And there's a query there around why is this massive influx happening over the past 3 years of larger legal global firms.
So I think two
things. Any
things.
particular reasons around that?
Well, I think Brexit is definitely, I think Brexit is definitely part of it, and the fact that we're, common law jurisdiction is very positive. I think the second thing is that some of the firms coming in are very boutique, so they're doing IP and data protection and things that are very relevant to the firm in our core offering as such. So they just want to be able to say that they have an EU offering, but they're not necessarily going to set up a full office service or full service offering, should I say. So some of them are just very small, very boutique-y, but there are a number of them, and I would say at least 10 that have significant ambitions for the Irish marketplace, and they feel that they can do business here because there's a very talented pool of young people available, and their clients are demanding that they have an EU presence as well.
Okay, and just going back to this point of the salaries going up between 5 to 10%, and that difference that depends on whether you're rural or urban, etc. Like, is that viable for the firms to continue
It's
this?
not viable if you don't increase your fee rates, and I think that's one of the issues we see with smaller firms. That you know, being a bit scared to, you know, say to clients, look, you know, our cost base has gone up, and therefore we need to increase our rates, because they're afraid that like some other firm will get the work. And I think, you know, the key thing here is a lot of legal firms have great relationships with their clients, and clients understand that costs are increased. Like the client's own cost base is increasing as well. So I think it's making sure that you have the conversation. Not saying you're going to get it every time, but like certainly you need to have these conversations, and you need to do it annually. You know, your cost base very rarely decreases, I have found, in business. So you really need to have the conversations, and you really need to put your prices up, because your cost base is going up, and every pound you give away is effectively a pound out of your pocket.
So just going back to this question, and it's a two-sided question, really, because how do we persuade non-Dublin-based lawyers to work remotely for a Dublin-based firm? Now, I know the smaller urban and rural-based would have the same question. How do we get more Dublin-based solicitors who want a better quality of life to move into the rural? So do you have any thoughts around that one? That's like a very sensitive issue here in the law society.
Well, we've seen a lot of people move out of the city to the regions and working from the regions for their practices in town, in Dublin. And, you know, we've actually seen not just people working in Ireland, we've seen people working internationally in France and Spain and places like that for firms. And what they do is like they just insist on those firms or those people coming into the office on set dates, so that at least they are part of a team, and the collegiality of working in the firm is not lost. Because one of the things you lose when a person is working remotely is that collegiality and attachment to the firm. So there's a fine balance that needs to be done. But like, we have seen a number of firms being able to retain people by offering them the lifestyle that they need or they want to stay involved in the practice. And I think people have to be a bit more flexible. I think there's a couple of things I would say. Obviously, you can't have one rule for every single person in the office. You have to have a balance that works. And I think that's really where, you know, we're seeing now a pressure among the larger firms to try and get more people back into the office. And what I call light touch to mid touch of, you need to, you know, we want to see our teams working together again, because there's a greater opportunity to cross refer work across service lines when people are in the office. And sometimes there's a difficulty in getting people engaged when they're working remotely, because, you know, they're on calls, they're at meetings, and people don't know that. Whereas you walk up to their desk and you see them, you know, the person rings you back within 5 minutes if they're on a call, as the case may be. For regional practices, we don't see too much of an issue in terms of remote working. I mean, most of them seem to be operating and did operate during COVID with people in the office. And, you know, I think some people see the office as a refuge from, you know, domestic life as well, which is not a bad thing. But I think it is important that you get the mix right, and that you understand the needs of your team, you know, and that's where developing the attractiveness of the firm and the positivity of a firm and the collegiality of a firm is really important, and not to lose the culture.
Listen, we're out of time, Paul. Thanks a million, Paul and Mark, for your insights today. I know you're doing a follow-up survey in July, August of next year, and if anyone wants to participate, to contact mark.lowry@evelyn.ie.com.
Yeah.
Or you can contact me directly. We'll be sending out the slides and a recording later in the week, and they're available on our website. The two sessions coming up on the 19th of April are benefits of being a consultant, and then the 3rd of May, buying, selling, and merging, what are my options? So we look forward to you all joining us today. So thanks again, Paul and Mark, for participating with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So